Hello, good morning, good evening today. Thank you for joining our weekly live stream to cover man and machine, the future of artificial intelligence versus human intelligence. Although I suppose it should be woman and machine because of our guest here today, who I'll introduce in just a moment. Um, and before we get started, before we introduce our guest, I'll cover a couple logistical items before we get going here. First of all, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And this is a weekly live stream we do each week. We stream to YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And this live discussion that you're part of here today is going to be used in our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast, which will be released a week from tomorrow. So by being here today, you're part of our live production of our weekly live stream. So thank you for being here. I will ask for audience questions along the way, or I'll take audience questions along the way. So if you have any questions or comments on the topic here today, we'd love to hear from you, and we'll take those questions as we go. And then secondly, or lastly, before we get started, before I introduce our guest, if you could just drop in the chat where you're joining from today. I'd love to hear what city and country you're joining from here today. It's always good to see where our live audience is, or where our global live audience is joining us from here today. So please drop in the chat city and country where you're from. I'd love to see where you're at here today. So as I mentioned before, our topic is the future of artificial intelligence versus human intelligence. So really what we want to do here today is unpack the not the bifurcation, but the contrast between artificial intelligence and technology advancements that are happening in the world today, and how does that compare, and how does that affect human intelligence, and how does human intelligence intersect with artificial intelligence? So we're going to really dive into this sort of man versus machine thread here today to really understand the importance of both technology and the human component of change and transformation, but also to understand how they might conflict with one another, how you make sure they integrate with one another, and really dive in it and understand really the more people focused side of transformation here today. So we'll really dive deep into the organizational change management piece of it. And joining us for that discussion is the perfect host for this, first time host, but also the perfect host for this topic. And that is Noush Bayat, who is a director of strategy and transformation at Third Stage Consulting. Noush, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
Excited to have you here. I know you and I have known each other for a long time. We go back a ways just in the industry, but you have recently joined the Third Stage team, and love having you on the team. And this was one of the first things you and I discussed once you joined the company, was this whole concept of the human side of change as well as the technology side of change. And then more specifically, as we were brainstorming ideas for this discussion, we really landed on this thread of artificial intelligence versus human intelligence, and how the two compare, why they're both important, how they might conflict with one another, and what organizations might do to navigate that tension. But before we really dive into the heart of the conversation, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Noosh, as far as your academic and your professional background, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Before I start, you said that people would be typing in where they're joining us from. I haven't seen anything on my screen, but I'm looking forward to seeing who's on the call and where they're joining us from. Yeah, so I started my education and career in computer science, and I remember one of my first jobs was I was a computer analyst at a local hospital. And my job was to transfer their data from the mainframe computer that they had over to a PC network environment. And that was kind of the beginning of me getting really curious about human intelligence. I didn't uh, use that term at the time, but I remember. Oh, there's all these errors that are popping up on my
Oh,
screen.
we see and hear you fine. It might be the feed, the
Okay.
chat, because don't worry, we see and hear you.
I guess more and more because the hospital was supporting the community so much, you know, they were providing, free immunization vans in tough neighborhoods. They were doing a lot of amazing community-based health work, and I was in the background making sure that their computer systems were supporting, they had the data and the computer systems were supporting their outreach. But more and more, I was noticing that there's some people who just walked around with a twinkle in their eyes. Like, it didn't matter how much money they had or didn't have, or it didn't matter what kind of life circumstances they had. There was just this sense of joy and effervescence. And then I would also notice that there were people with all the financial means in the world, but there was just a pain in their eyes and in their encounters with me. And I was just so drawn to both ends of the spectrum because at the time there was just a lot of global upheavals going on, political upheavals um, in the region of the world I was from. And as a young person, my heart was broken because there was just a lot of impacts on my personal life, a lot of losses. And so when I would look at someone that had that kind of sense of hopelessness and sadness in their eyes, I would empathize, like, I got it, and I felt like I was in that camp. But then when I would notice other people where they had all the hardships going on, but there was just a bounce in their steps, there was a deep engagement that I just couldn't articulate. So, much to my dad's dismay, instead of pursuing my studies and graduate studies in technology and computer science, I went the route of studying human wellness or population health, population wellness. I got a master's in public health. Along the way, I got a master's in spiritual psychology, meditation and mindfulness. Literature. Um, so I was just really, really just so drawn for years about, what is it that makes humans want to engage? And of course, most recently, I got a doctorate in organizational leadership. And what I found out or learned about neuroscience really brought everything together for me, Eric. And it really helped me to see why in the past in my career trajectory, how sometimes I was not a good employee. Like, uh, despite all the perks and benefits that my company would provide, I just couldn't get engaged to the level that I was required to. And then in other situations, you couldn't shut me up. Like, I would just over engaged and I was asked to dial it back. So again, all of this, all my studies really helped me to really understand what is it that's going on within us that makes us want to engage or with life's challenges and ups and downs.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a background and upbringing that was perfect for this topic today here. So we really appreciate having you on the show here. And you're one of two people that I know of on the third stage staff that has a PhD. So that's interesting as well. So you've gone deep into the academics of this piece of it as well. So you've got the formal
Technically,
training.
it's an EDD, but so I just call it a doctorate, just to
Right.
be precise. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, either way, you're more educated than I am, so perfect for this thread here today. So so I guess to start then, what exactly is for the layperson then, someone who doesn't have a deep change management background or hasn't gone deep into the human side of change, how is it you would define human intelligence and or emotional intelligence, and are they different? Are they the same thing? Maybe we can start there with just sort of that basic understanding of what the term means.
Absolutely. I mean, the field of neuroscience, and psychology these days, it's so exciting. I think like every month there's a expansion of our understanding of human intelligence, what it means to be this human interacting with the world. Of course, from a just when you reflect on the ability of your body to breathe and your heart beating and your just all the things that your body is doing without you even being aware of it. So there's that intelligence that we're always aware of, so many of us. Um, the way that as a basic starting point, human intelligence was categorized into a few components: cognitive intelligence, emotional intelligence, music intelligence, spatial intelligence, all these sorts of things. And it used to be that I think even like up to maybe 30 years ago, that IQ was it. Like your intelligence as a human was equated to your score on an IQ test. But more and more, that singular focus on this kind of cognitive intelligence was th- just challenged by so many other types of intelligence, like I said, and emotional intelligence was identified as this ability, or it's called EQ
Mm.
versus IQ, this ability of us as humans to be able to not only understand and acknowledge and self regulate our own internal emotional landscape, but also be able to cue in on other people's, or in a social setting, kind of understand what is the um, what's everybody feeling, just to be able to um, understand how to intuitively relate to them. So, this ability to be able to build relationships, have empathy, um, be able to take a tech technological challenge, but be able to actually talk about it with somebody. That's kind of a brief summary of what I call emotional or human intelligence. Just all these capabilities that enable us to interact with the world and solve problems. I think in its most general, I think that's human intelligence for me.
Right. That's interesting. And why do you think that this is so important, this whole concept of human intelligence? Why is that so important in today's day and age of advanced technologies and artificial intelligence and all this great stuff that could potentially, in theory, replace or mimic human intelligence? What makes why is human intelligence so important, or is it important? I guess we could start there.
Absolutely. I think it's so critical because from what I understand about our brains, there's a huge component of our brain that supports us in predicting the future. So there's for us to feel at ease, it's when our brain is able to predict what's going to happen. You know, we wake up and we know that there's coffee in the kitchen, that I'm going to go open my computer and it's going to work well. So there's this predictive capability of of our brain that allows us to feel comfortable um, surviving and interacting with the world. What happens with technology and technological innovation, especially when you bring it within an organization, is that all of a sudden it's not a cognitively stable environment. And with that, I mean it's very complex. And what that means is that there's no linear causality. There's no way for our brain to fully wrap its hands around this technological innovation. One of the words that I learned when I was in grad school was VUCA, VUCA, which was coined by uh, the, the American, our military, once the Cold War was over and we no longer had a singular enemy to focus on. And they said, now our enemy is VUCA, which means conditions that are volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. So uh, this kind of conditions, which is uh, our daily realities these days, being able to, we go into a client setting and they bring us a challenge, but there is no singular answer that's going to fix every challenge that they're going to bring up. The level of complexity and the level of intervening factors and unpredictability, even in their organizational setting and culture, it's so much that because our brain can't just say, yep, the problem is X, the solution is Y, and our approach is Z. End of conversation. Because we can't do that in today's environment of technology and innovation and organizational complexity, what happens is that our brain literally sounds an alarm and feels threatened.
Hmm.
So when it can't find that linear causation and find that the cause of instability, it it raises this alarm. So our fight or flight stress response gets activated. And so often, people that their defense mechanisms come up. They get guarded, they get stressed, their stress hormones come up. So that's why, um, in these situations, especially in these times of complexity, technical skills aren't going to help us, because technical skills is when you go into a training environment and they tell you, if you press this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. But in times of complexity, because there is no clear pathway to our solution, and we have all this crazy stress response going on within us, this kind of emotional turmoil, for lack of a better word, what's really required are adaptive skills.
Hmm.
Skills where you can actually be able to show up to a meeting where everybody's frustrated and they want you to fix it with a magic pill, to be able to take a breath and self regulate your emotions, be able um, to challenge that part of your brain that wants to fix it
Hmm.
so fast, because our brain loves to do that. It loves to keep going really hard and labeling situations. However, this kind of fix it mentality in complex situations is really tough, because there is no fix it approach.
Hmm.
In these times of complexity, one person can't just come and fix the situation. The person that you paid a lot of money to and hired, they can't just go to their room, come up with a strategy and push it down. There's going to be resistance, there's going to be pushback, because the situation is so complex. One of the researchers whom I followed a lot at MIT, he called this dynamic complexity, where our sense of the problem is unclear, our sense of the solution is unclear, and the people impacted, our sense of the stakeholders is unclear. So he called this dynamic complexity. And again, in these situations, our brains and our emotional state, they're just not happy, because our brain can't just label it and be done with it.
Hmm.
What's required is these adaptive skills of taking a breath, slowing down, being comfortable in the face of such a complex situation, and being able to bring people together so that you can iterate ideas. So when things speed up, being able to slow down and actually listen and collaborate, and not have a fix-it approach, but basically have an iterative and incremental approach to this issue that your brain wants to fix so badly.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super interesting. So that's a interesting overview of the human side of change and why it's so difficult. I love that was I love that the acronym. What was the acronym again? Was it
VUCA,
VUCA? And tell us again. It's volatility.
unpredictability, complexity and ambiguity. So volatility just refers to this crazy pace of change that's going on. Unpredictability meaning you make your plan and you think it's going to give you one outcome and then it gives you a completely different outcome. Complexity in that there is no clear causality, or there's so many cause and effects that you can't just narrow it down to if A then B. And then ambiguity, just the fog of, whenever we talk about artificial intelligence, there's all of a sudden I feel a fog coming on everybody, like, what exactly is it again?
Right. That's funny.
One of the researchers I love to follow, he called these kinds of challenging problems wicked problems as an actual technical term, meaning wicked problems don't have one solution to fix it. They're so complex and they're not going anywhere. And they require you to actually just manage and meet that situation instead of try to fix it, because it's
Mm,
not going to be fixed, and it's not going away.
right. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, we'll stay focused and centered on VUCA here today
Okay.
as we go through the conversation with that in mind, and that's a great way to think about why not only why the human side of change is so important, but also why it's difficult. Why is it difficult for people to adapt to change? And I think that VUCA acronym really describes that well, and it's a good reminder of some of the complexities that humans face, or that we as humans face when we're going through technological change. What I want to do is just turn to the audience real quickly and look at where some people are joining from today. We had a few people comment on where they're joining from today. We have Ryan from Denver, Sam from Spain, Laik from Atlanta, Georgia, Joel from New Jersey, Peter from Raleigh, North Carolina, HA from Cairo, Europe. So there's a couple or I'm sorry, not Cairo, Europe, Cairo, Egypt, I should say, that HA Hashab is from. So thank you for being here today, those of you that have dropped in the chat where you're at today. And if you have questions along the way, anything related to the human intelligence side of change or just organizational change in general, would love to hear your comments and questions. And I'll kind of get through my initial questions, and we'll turn to the audience as well. So I guess as we dive into this, then why is you've done a great job of describing just what human intelligence is and what some of the complexities of human intelligence are, um, as it relates to just overall business change, whether it's digital transformation or any sort of transformation for that matter. But in general, why is human intelligence so important? It might be assumed, or we might be able to speculate based on what you've said so far. But how would you describe or summarize why it's so important in today's day and age of technologies?
Absolutely. Well, the more we step into learning and artificial intelligence and all the amazing things that AI is providing us, from what I understand, it's kind of like the garbage in, garbage out that my professor in my first class in computer science told us, that, this is a box. You put garbage in and you're going to get garbage out. And so from what I understand about artificial intelligence, machine learning, is that to the extent that we feed it accurate data, to the extent that we validate the learning process of the machine, that's the extent to which we're going to get benefits from artificial intelligence, from machine learning. If we can't bring our full human intelligence to the table, if we can't draw on the institutional knowledge that our people have about their processes, about their industry, about their competition, about the best ways to move forward, if we can't draw on that, if our people are overwhelmed, if they're stressed, if they're guarded in these defense mechanisms, we're just not going to have accurate validation of any of this data that we're getting these machines to learn. So if I feel like, if we're not able to fully tap into our own emotional intelligence, human intelligence, um, and really be able to manage the overthinking that happens, this kind of this stress response that comes over us when we're faced with complex situations that literally, in a way, shuts us down. When our stress response is happening, our capabilities to learn, Eric, are really hampered. If we're in this overly stressed, overwhelmed situation, it's really hard for us to learn. It's really hard
Mm,
for us to calm down and actually meet the actual face the situation that we're facing. We're so caught up in the meaning that we're making about the situation instead of actually being able to face it. So again, if we can't bring our full human intelligence to program these machines, to get them to do what we're wanting them to do, um, uh, I would be scared about our future because th- these machines, they're just not going to give us what we were hoping that they would provide.
mm. Yeah, yeah, without that missing secret sauce, if you will, of
Absolutely.
human side.
Yeah, I don't I think there's just a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of confusion in terms of, oh my God, machines are going to take over, as if they're inherently intelligent and they're just going to take us over. And I think that feeling of overwhelm, that feeling of like, oh my God, that's the end of life, it gets us to shut down and want to just be in denial and not want to learn what the hell is learning? What is artificial intelligence? Because we all can learn about it and we all can make really intelligent decisions in collaboration with our team members. However, I think because of the volume of information out there on the internet, the volume of misinformation, fake information. So we get so overwhelmed. Our system gets so overwhelmed that we'd rather not know or tune out than to actually understand what the challenges are, what the issues are, and how do I develop my team to be able to deal with this.
Right, right. Yeah, and I'd love to hear from the audience too. Why do you think human intelligence is so important? In what do you think the biggest complexities of human intelligence are? I'd love to hear feedback from the audience as we continue the conversation here. But that's a great overview that you provided there, Noosh. So as we look to you were starting to allude to this a little bit, Noosh, as we got into as you described why human intelligence is so important in today's advanced technological era. But in addition to that, what are some of the consequences if I'm a leader in an organization and I don't focus enough on human intelligence or emotional intelligence, and I focus too much on technology. I'm sort of myopically focused on just making the technology work from a technological perspective. What are the consequences, or why is that a problem in today's day and
You
age?
really, I mean, I'm sure we all have those times when we remember where we got so stressed that we literally couldn't do our jobs well. I definitely been in situations like that where I was even asked to leave one of the organizations that I love so much just because I would get so stressed about my ability to perform well that instead of taking that breath and bringing my human intelligence to deal with that stress, I would tune out and check out. And so I was perceived as not a good member of the team because I just couldn't get past my overwhelm. I couldn't get past my confusion. I couldn't even bring myself to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Could someone teach me this? Because just the sense of overwhelm and the sense of that imposter syndrome. I think in our organizations today, executives and people across all the levels were asked to deal with so many situations in our places of work that are so novel. And it's so easy for us to, of course, experience overwhelm and confusion and all the stress response, the increase of stress hormones, our heart palpitations, our increased blood pressure, all of this. And if we can't find a way to self-regulate that, and if our organizations keep piling up change after change after change without really understanding what it is that their humans need in order to be well, we're going to lose our most capable people. We're going to lose the brain um, trust of our organizations. People are literally going to say, I can't figure it out. I'm just going to check out. They're either going to stay in the organization and really derail any effort there is for progress, or they're just going to leave. And there you have it. Your people with the most passion, with the most heart, with the most industry expertise, who can help you get to that next phase of technological innovation, you've just pushed them over the edge. And that's not just because some people can't deal with stress. That's a human thing, and it's impacting all of us, from little kids to our elderly. This overflux of change, this over uh, uh, this what's the word I'm trying to find, this just this change overload, and this expectation that we should be able to get up and fix it, and our lack of ability to fix it, um, and our lack of ability to be able to talk about the fact that one person can't just fix it. We need to come together and listen and collaborate and brainstorm. The lack of ability to do this is really harming a lot of our workforce. Stress rates, anxiety rates, depression rates, suicide rates are really at an all-time high right now in our country. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
My mic was off. There we go. So, rookie mistake there. I had the mute button on. It's a great point. I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about is just how hard it is for people's lives in general, outside of work, and then you come to the workplace and then you throw all these changes and stressors and triggers on top of people, and it can certainly add up for certain. So that's a great point. So here's an interesting comment from the audience here. This is from Urtaza on LinkedIn. I hope I pronounced that name. I probably did not, so I apologize if I didn't. But the comment here is: human intelligence has the common sense factor, which AI sometimes lacks, or somewhat lacks. So we talk a lot about ChatGPT. That's a common topic today. It's a hot trend right now. It's a hot buzzword in the technological space, and it's a hot tool being used by a lot of people. And it's interesting to hear or sort of see how these two worlds are colliding. That human intelligence with artificial intelligence. But how do you can artificial and technology ever replace common sense, as Urtaza mentions here? Is there or what are your thoughts on that? Or your comments? Your
I
reaction?
mean, um, I, to tell you the truth, I don't know. What I do know is this incredible miracle of being human, this ability to experience so much stress, our brain, the capabilities of our brain to help us through so many difficult situations, and then also this ability for us to have presence and wisdom, to be able to love, to appreciate, to have empathy with each other. I think those are qualities as humans, we don't even know what that is. I mean, you've been in situations, we've all been in situations where someone has treated us with what we've perceived was utmost disrespect and cruelty. And you can feel what it does to you. You kind of contract and you want to get away from them. And it's like it throws you off in so many situations. Like, what is that? What just happened? And then vice versa, you're in a situation when there's lots of love and compassion and empathy, and all of a sudden you feel like you're coming up with amazing new ideas and innovations, and it's like, what happened? Like, there's just so many subtleties to human ingenuity, to human interaction, to love, really, to love and compassion that, I mean, I think from what I understand so far, it's like machines can learn patterns in our behaviors, so that if they observe me interacting with a child, they can say, oh, you have to say this to a child to get them to do this, and your tone of voice has to become kinder, or this and that. But is that really empathy? Is that really love? Is that really compassion? Like, I know that computers can have this incredible computational ability that humans can never, I don't think, have right now as we speak, this ability to crunch vast volumes of data. Um, but can they bring that love and compassion and human presence to it to determine what to do with it? I
Mhm.
think that part of it, it's still, we're teaching computers that. We're teaching AI that capability, but I don't think will it ever be organic? I mean, will a machine ever organically realize that they need to love or bring compassion and respect into a situation? Uh, I don't know. I'm I'm guessing not, but you never know.
Right. No, it's a great point. I'd be curious to hear what the audience thinks on that debate or that question. Speaking of the audience, here's a really interesting comment. It's a two-part question that I'll play here, or I'll show here from Jerry on it's either Jerry or Gary. I apologize, I'm not sure which, but on LinkedIn, um, Gary says today's words that are considered to be able to create harm and be violent. Now we have computers that can say words. We as humans need to get over our fear of words. But then there's a second part here. The human condition will kill innovation in the AI space. There's a lot of fear about what machines might say.
Absolutely, Jerry, or Gary, that's such a great point, which goes back to what I was bringing up earlier in terms of being able to self-regulate. Emotional intelligence is so critical right now, to be able to notice our reactive tendencies towards things that we don't understand, and to
Mm-hmm.
have it be normal,
Right.
to understand that human defense mechanisms, or uh, our tendency to get reactive in the face of things we don't know and to want to shut down, those are so normal, and to be able to breathe through it and not take that seriously, not be so overwhelmed by it. So that in so much of my executive coaching work that I do, that's such a critical part of supporting executives to move through their days and make the decisions that they have to make, by understanding that being human is really this dance between this reactive survival brain that we have, that hates anything that it doesn't understand, and this part of us that's full of wisdom and presence and innovation and creativity. It's really a dance. We can't be 100% in one or the other. It's always a dance. And to be able to understand that subtlety of how we interact with the world, that when there's something that I don't understand, that all of a sudden I notice my heart rate increasing, I notice wanting to just crawl under the covers instead of say, all right, team, let's get together. Let's throw some ideas at the chalk. At the board. Let's see what we can come up with. This ability to not freak out by our own freak out. It's really important to have compassion for our tendency to freak out, but not take it so seriously that we can't become present to our challenges, or all these, like you said, Jerry, these amazing opportunities to innovate. Um, so that self-regulation, that understanding of our neuroscience is so critical.
Right. Yeah. Makes total sense. It's a great question and a great response to it too. So thank you for the feedback, Jerry. Um, so what about one thing you and I have talked about in our time working together has been um, how the divide between human intelligence and artificial intelligence and just technological advances in general, how that chasm is growing. The technology is becoming more and more advanced, but we as humans, we're changing, but we're not changing nearly as fast as technology is. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what should we be thinking about as it relates to that divide between the human race where we are today, and yes, we're evolving, but not nearly as fast as that exponential, accelerated advancement of technology. How do we navigate that? What are your thoughts there?
Well, that's the thing, when we're feeling stress, a little bit of a stress is great in terms of enhancing our ability to learn, right? Like this live cast, the invitation to show up here, it caused a lot of stress for me. But that stress, I utilized it. It was good. I was like, okay, let me go through my thoughts. Let me understand what I'm going to talk about so that I sound somewhat decent, and you don't fire me tomorrow. So that little bit of stress is very healthy. That kind of stress gets us to study hard for an exam, to get prepared, to get excited. However, when that level of anxiety and stress, and to various people it's different, it goes overboard, it really inhibits our ability to learn. And I think that as machines are surpassing our capabilities to learn, which is okay thing, it's like, yeah, let machines learn all these things that are going to take me years and years and years to learn. However, how can I show up and interact with that machine learning so that I can bring my human intelligence, I can bring my insights, and I can put that machine learning to good use? I think that's the divide that we really need to address. What is that? What is it with it within our human condition that can create so much stress that makes us incapable of even wanting to interact with the complexities that machine innovation is bringing to us? So I think I keep going back to being able to have that level of emotional self-regulation, and not only that, but really being able to make sense of the world. Our brain loves is a storyteller. It
Mm-hmm.
loves to make meaning out of the challenges that are happening so that it can engage with it um, in the brilliant ways that it does. But if our meaning making ability gets diminished, if I'm putting a meaning on everything as, this is going to take my job away, I'm never going to be able to do this, like this, our capabilities of making meaning out of in stressful situations. If we can't expand that meaning making ability, that story making capability that we all have, we're not going to take our organizations to the next levels, because organizations are about the culture, are about the vision, mission statements that they have, are about the meaning that they create in the world. And if their people um, um, are at that brink of stress and anxiety, that they cannot bring new sets of meaning to the challenges that they're making, um, I think we're not going to get as much out of machine innovation and artificial intelligence as we hope that we can get.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point and well said. And Jim on YouTube has an interesting comment. He says that AI will not take jobs. Humans using AI will take jobs from humans. What are your thoughts? Do you have any predictions as it relates to that news, as it relates to this?
Absolutely. There's so many thought pieces coming out these days from so many of our think tanks that I think even here at Third Stage that, yeah, maybe remedial jobs are going to be taken over. Maybe that data cruncher no longer needs to spend 40 hours a week crunching data. However, when that machine can do it in 5 seconds, then we need that person with the maybe a different set of skills to interact with that AI, right? So I don't think that humans will be um, uh, completely taken out of the job market, but new capabilities for sure that we have to learn as humans in order to be able to interact with this amazing um, uh, uh, data crunching power, for lack of a better word, or data mining that the machines and AI bring to us. I think new jobs are going to be created as a result, honestly. Certain jobs will be taken away, but definitely new jobs will be brought to the forefront. And to be able to validate the output that these new machines that are taking over jobs, in order to validate their output, there's going to have to be that human intervention to say, yep, this machine did it right, or no, we have to fix it. So I don't think you can get rid of humans, but we definitely have to continue to learn and grow. And I think when you look back over human evolution, we've had to do that at
Mm,
various, what do you say, epochs in our evolution. We've had to learn new things. So it's not the uh, end of our. Uh, it's not a bad thing to have to evolve and learn new skill sets.
right. Yeah, that's well said, and I agree with you. It's not a bad thing. And here's an interesting comment from Sam on LinkedIn. And Sam says, to get the best from AI, do we need to learn to be better at asking questions? And I think this is a fascinating question or comment because it sort of plays to the whole emotional intelligence and how can you use emotional intelligence or human intelligence to make AI more effective. Do you see that being the
Absolutely.
case?
That's 100% Sam. You're so spot on. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about adaptive skills. You need adaptive skills in conjunction with your technical skills to be able to maneuver through this world of complexity where there is no linear causation. And adaptive skills are exactly that, our ability to be able to slow down, take a breath, have craft better questions in order to engage, bring people together to be able to understand what is even our questions, what is our starting point. So these adaptive skills are 100% so critical these days.
Right. Yeah. Great question, Sam, and even better response, Noosh. So thank you for that. What about employee and organizational wellness? You talk, and I think you alluded to this a little bit as we were talking before about stress and the VUCA acronym that we talked about earlier. What are some of the ways that constant change and the advancements of change in general and the organizational change in general, how is that affecting the wellness or lack thereof of organizations and their employees?
I mean, we we interact with organizations 24/7, at least 8 hours a day on calls with our amazing clients and our amazing teams, and, we know that executives and everyone in organizations are really suffering these days.
Mm,
There is so much disruption and change going on. There's such a fast pace to need to quickly re-strategize, quickly roll out something so that you don't fall behind the curve, so that you can stay competitive. And we're brought in those fires, as you know, we're brought in to provide organizational change management strategies, it used to be back in 2005 when I started in OCM that there was just like one change, and we organized all our efforts to that one change, and it was called that point of change was called the Valley of Despair, where you had a dip in performance, and all our efforts were to really mitigate that dip in performance and support the people to navigate through that dip, that valley of despair, and go back on track. There was one new technology, or there was a culture change, or there was a merger. Like there was just one change. But honestly, over the past 5, 6 years, it's like these Russian dolls. There's like change on top of change on top of change. We're brought into an organization to support them with their technological change and adoption. And all of a sudden you see that, oh my God, there was a merger and acquisition here. There's this technology change there. There's just so much happening at the same time. So I think one of the ways that organizations have to deal with it is to really tap into the human intelligence in their teams, really bring them along, not just force changes on them, but really bring them to the table. Bring your frontline people to the table. Create these coalitions across the agency where you can learn from the human intelligence of all your teammates, because the challenges that executives are facing to be competitive isn't something that they can just figure out behind closed doors anymore. They have to tap into the human intelligence of their full teams. And if there is a technological change that they want to go through, or a cultural change, then it's the human intelligence of their full organization that's going to help them to bridge that gap. Because these days there's not just one valley of despair, there's just despair,
Right.
period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's just so much, and you don't know which change you're trying to mitigate. So tapping into that human intelligence and bringing the people to the table so that they're co-owners of taking the organization to the next level. They can bring their insights, they can bring um, their influence, their peer influence, to really support their people to bridge, move through these transition states.
Right. Right. Yeah. Great point, and very well said. So we've covered a lot here in terms of you know the fact that technology is changing so quickly and how the impact affects employees and organizations, and why human intelligence is so important. And in some ways, it can be overwhelming to think about all this stuff. It's a lot to take in, especially when, like I said before, a lot of times we're more focused on the shiny, cool technology. We're focused on the things that we can see and touch and feel. So, given that it is so important, human intelligence, and it is so complex and it's hard to get our head around at times, what are some of the best ways to really start addressing the human versus technology issues in an organizational change strategy and plan? So, as we're planning for change, what is it? What are some ways that we can get started, or some tangible first steps that we can take to?
Absolutely. Well, I would say to anyone who has that power to give the go ahead to these huge tech innovations, it's, really think twice about your aggressive timelines. You and I both know we've been in so many tech implementations where they started out with a very aggressive timeline, but their business functions, they just weren't able to um, understand the new business processes fast enough. So implementation had to just get pushed, or they had to press go live, but the organization was just in disarray because their people couldn't understand their business requirements fast enough. So I think one of the first things is that think twice about your aggressive timeline. You think you have to go live in 3 months, but do you?
Right. And what are the consequences of doing
Do
that?
you?
Yeah.
And can we phase it? How can you, again, bring your people into the conversation that even if you have to go live in 30 days or in that crazy aggressive timeline, that your people are with you. You can't just say anymore, this is what's going to happen. You have to either learn it or leave. Well, I mean, if you do that approach, which a lot of organizations, it seems like that's their last approach, you're going to see a lot of good people leaving your organizations. And sometimes organizations use that as a way to clean house, unfortunately, to let go, to have people self-select out so that they can bring new people on board. But if that's the culture of your organization, then you're going to burn those people out too. You're going to have such high turnovers that you're just not going to have people who are the carriers of your culture. You're not going to have people who are going to stand by you and be loyal and really breathe passion into your mission and vision. So yeah, think twice about your implementation timeline, bring your people on board, start to have those conversations, bring value to what people understand is their business requirements. So often we want to just dive into change impact analysis, but it's like, well, if I'm pushing this change onto my, let's say, my warehouse unit or my sales team, like, what is, let them talk to you about what are those business requirements that they need. What is it that makes them successful today? Like they're able to talk to their customer quickly and efficiently. They're able to give them a quote, kind of like they've done historically, very quickly. That customer feels heard and understood. Okay, if that's a business requirement, how can we preserve that no matter what technology is brought? How could we bend technology to help us preserve that business requirement? So often, like you said, I think um, software vendors, they want us to bend our mission and values and business processes to fit the technology. But
Right.
if we can bring our full human intelligence to those conversations, we can actually have a nice dialogue with our software vendors saying, hey, you're telling me that this out of the box functionality is the only way, but is it?
Right.
You know? And if it is, well, we need to have a phased approach so that we can find workarounds because we don't wanna give up this business requirement. So I think, we have to have more of a conversation instead of an arm wrestle between our, technology and our, and what makes us be successful businesses in terms of meeting our customer needs.
Right. Yeah. Well said. And I think that that's a great way to start. I mean, I think that's what we have to look at is how do we start this journey? How do we start to, at the very least, think about the human side of change and the organizational change side of things. And we talk about that a lot on this podcast. The whole idea of the importance of change management, why the people side of the equation is so important. But we're getting pretty deep into this here as far as that human intelligence piece, which is so critical for sure. Well, good. Well, I want to thank you for being here. Time flies when you're having fun, and we're already up against the hour here. So thank you for being here with us here today, Noosh. Really appreciate it, and definitely appreciate the audience being here as well today.
Thank you so much. And before we sign off, I just wanted to say something that happened in my own team at third stage over the past couple of weeks, where there was something that I said that was misinterpreted by somebody. My intentions were misinterpreted, and we were able to come to the table and have some intelligent and emotional conversations around it so that we could help to resolve whatever that challenge was so that we could get to the work that we're trying to get, which is technology and supporting with people with that adoption, and it didn't go past me how important that was, that my boss was able to bring his human intelligence into the conversation, that we were all the parties were able to come to the table, that whether we were reluctant or not, we were able to be able to say, hey, I'm feeling some stress around this situation or that situation, and how can we bring our humanity into this conversation so that we can resolve it? There's like hundreds and thousands of these instances that happen these days in the workplace as organizations are trying to go to their future state of technology innovation, and being able to slow down and bring our human and emotional intelligence into the workplace so that we can build bridges of understanding. We can build strong relationships that can withstand the turmoils that are in our way is really critical. And I'm so happy that I'm in an organization that really lives those values and is able to model that every day.
Right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words, and that is important, because every
Yeah.
organization has conflict, especially when you're going through change and when you're transforming the business. That's just going to lead to common conflict and misalignment and disagreement, all those sorts of things. So I think that's a great point. Um,
Thank you.
well, good. Well, thank you so much for being here, Noosh. Really appreciate it. You're a great first time guest. You had nothing to be nervous about. I hope you didn't feel too
Whew.
stressed out.
I need a cigarette now.
You're right. Speaking of human intelligence, we need a cigarette to decompress from the conversation. But no, thank you for being here, and thank you to the audience too for the great questions. This is a pretty intense or a pretty heavy topic, I'd say,
It's
but really
just
good to.
really normalizing the human experience, humanizing our workplaces to take into account our normal stress-based responses to things. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That's well said. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for joining, everyone. Appreciate the conversation. This is a very interesting topic. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for being here. Again, as I mentioned before, this interview will become part of the Transformation Ground Control podcast that gets released a week from tomorrow. So when if and when you subscribe to the Transformation Ground Control podcast, you'll hear this episode as part of the podcast or as part of the episode that is released a week from tomorrow. So thank you for being here today and being part of the live production of that podcast. And as I also mentioned before, every Tuesday, same time, same place, you can find this live stream. We're here to have these sorts of interviews and live discussions to make part of our podcast. So thank you for joining, and be sure to check us out on future episodes as well. So thank you everyone for being here today. Hope you all have a great day, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on our digital transformation live stream. Have a great week in the meantime, and thank you again, Noosh, for being here today.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Have a great week.